The alarm systems on the Valori science vessel screamed into the darkness of space. Commander Zixala's three eyes widened as she watched the engine readings drop to critical levels. Her delicate, blue-tinted fingers moved across the control panel with desperate speed, but nothing she did made any difference. The ship was dying, and they were far from any help. "Send the distress signal," she commanded, her voice steady, despite the fear that gripped her chest. "Send it on all frequencies. Someone has to hear us." The communications officer, a young Valori named Piptok, worked frantically at his station. "Broadcasting now, Commander. But we are in the forbidden sector. The radiation storms will block most of our signal." Zixala knew he was right. They had come to this dangerous region to study the strange gravitational anomalies that no one understood. It was supposed to be a quick survey mission. They would collect data and leave before the deadly conditions could harm them. But the engine failure changed everything. Now they were trapped in a place where few ships dared to travel, and even fewer could survive for long. The Luminous Hope drifted in the black void, its engines cold and silent. Around them, invisible waves of radiation pulsed through space like the breath of some terrible beast. The ship's shields were holding for now, but Zixala knew they would not last forever. Already, the readings showed dangerous levels of exposure. Her crew of 40 scientists and engineers had come here to advance knowledge for their people. Now they might die for it. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The distress signal continued to broadcast, but no response came. The crew gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed voices. Some prayed to the old gods of Valor. Others simply sat in silence, watching the stars through the viewports and wondering if anyone would come. Far across the galaxy, in a gleaming chamber that floated in orbit around the planet Centralis Prime, the Galactic Council received the distress call. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the circular meeting hall, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. The message from the Luminous Hope played for all to hear, and the room fell silent as they listened to Commander Zixala's plea for rescue. Ambassador Throck of the Thorian Empire was the first to speak. His massive frame, covered in thick scales that had evolved to withstand harsh desert worlds, seemed to shrink as he addressed the council. "The location of this vessel presents an impossible challenge. The forbidden sector is known to all of us. The radiation levels alone would kill any rescue crew before they could reach the stranded ship." A representative from the Kessic Collective, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, flickered with agreement. "Our analysis confirms this assessment. The gravitational anomalies in that region would tear most vessels apart. Even if a ship could survive the radiation, the structural stress would be catastrophic." The debate continued for hours. Some argued that they must try to save the Valori crew. Others insisted that sending more ships to their doom would be foolish. The mathematics were clear and cruel. Any rescue mission would require vessels to endure conditions that exceeded all known safety parameters. The rescue crew would die before they could save anyone. On the other side of the galaxy, at Earth's orbital station Unity 1, the night shift was settling into its routine. Lisa Grant sat at her communications console, monitoring the various frequencies that connected humanity to the rest of the galactic community. Earth was new to this community. Only 3 years had passed since first contact, and humans were still learning their place among the stars. Lisa was young, just 26 years old, with short brown hair and bright green eyes that reflected the glow of her screens. She had grown up in Colorado dreaming of the stars, and now she lived among them. Her job was usually quiet. Most nights she listened to routine traffic and filed reports that no one would read. But tonight was different. A faint signal caught her attention. It was weak, distorted by interference, but it was there. Lisa adjusted her equipment, filtering out the noise, and slowly the message became clear. Her heart raced as she realized what she was hearing. A ship was in trouble, and they were calling for help. She immediately contacted Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Dawn, Earth's rescue vessel stationed at Unity 1. Morrison was asleep in his quarters when the call came through, but he answered immediately. At 42 years old, he had spent half his life in military service before joining the space program. His face was weathered, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting at horizons, and his gray hair was cut short in military fashion. "We have a distress call." "Captain," Lisa said, sending him the data. "A Valori science ship. They are stuck in a place called the Forbidden Sector. Morrison pulled up the information on his personal display, his eyes scanning the details. The location made him frown. Even with his limited knowledge of galactic geography, he could see this would not be easy. But his response was immediate and certain. "Wake the crew. Tell them we launch in 30 minutes. Sir," Lisa hesitated. "The Galactic Council is still debating whether a rescue is even possible. The conditions in that sector are extreme." Morrison looked at her through the video link and his expression was calm. "Someone is in trouble. We can help. That is all I need to know. Get me clearance to launch." Within minutes, the crew of the Terran Dawn was awake and moving. They were veterans, all of them. People who had volunteered for the most dangerous job humanity could offer. When Earth joined the galactic community, the government had created a rescue service, knowing that humans might be called upon to help in situations that other species could not handle. The crew of the Terran Dawn had trained for 3 years, preparing for a call that might never come. Now it had arrived. Pete Hughes, the chief engineer, was the first to reach the ship. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and strong, with hands that seemed too big for the delicate work he did. But those hands could fix almost anything, and his mind understood machines in a way that seemed almost magical. He began running diagnostics on the ship's systems, checking every circuit and wire. Amy Chen arrived next. She was the navigator, small and quick, with black hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had grown up in San Francisco, where her parents ran a small restaurant, and she had learned early that success required precision and attention to detail. Now she applied those lessons to plotting courses through space, finding paths where others saw only obstacles. One by one, the crew assembled. Kyle Roberts, the doctor, calm and steady with gentle hands. Nicole Sanders, the pilot, fearless and sharp. Chris Bennett, the weapons officer, quiet and focused. Danny Cruz and Stephanie Ward, the specialists who handled external repairs. Greg Palmer, the nurse who assisted Kyle. Each person had a role and each person was ready. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge as his crew took their positions. He opened a communication channel to Earth's command center, requesting permission to launch. The response came quickly, but it was not what he expected. "Terran Dawn, this is command. The Galactic Council has advised against any rescue attempt. They consider the mission impossible. The conditions in the Forbidden Sector exceed all safety parameters for known vessels." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Command, are we receiving orders to stand down?" There was a pause. Then a different voice came through, older and deeper. It was Admiral Richard Hayes, the commander of Earth's Space Forces. "Jake, I am not ordering you to stand down, but I need you to understand what you are flying into. The data we have received shows radiation levels that would kill most species instantly. The gravitational stress would crush conventional ships. The Galactic Council believes no one can survive this rescue." "With respect, Admiral, the Galactic Council does not know what humans can survive," Morrison replied. "We have reviewed the data. It is dangerous, but it is not impossible. We request permission to attempt the rescue." Another pause, longer this time. Morrison could imagine the debate happening in the command center back on Earth. This was a risk. If they failed, if the crew died, it would be a tragedy for Earth and a mark of shame in the galactic community. But if they did not try, if they let the Valori crew die when they might have saved them, that would be worse. Finally, Admiral Hayes spoke again. "Permission granted, Terran Dawn. Bring them home." The Galactic Council was still debating when they received the notification that Earth was launching a rescue mission. The chamber fell silent as Ambassador Helen Price, Earth's representative, stood to address the assembly. She was a diplomat, trained to speak carefully and choose her words with precision, but now her voice carried an edge of steel. "The Terran Dawn is en route to rescue the Luminous Hope," she announced. "Our crew is prepared for the conditions they will face." Ambassador Throck looked at her with something like pity in his large eyes. "Ambassador Price, we appreciate your world's eagerness to help. But your species is new to space travel. You do not understand the forces your crew will encounter. The radiation alone will be fatal." Helen Price smiled, and there was no humor in it. "Ambassador, my species evolved on a world with radiation levels that would kill most of you within days. Our sun bombards us with energy that your people would consider a death sentence. We have lived with this our entire existence." The Terran Dawn cut through space like a knife through water. On the bridge, Captain Jake Morrison watched the navigation display as they approached the outer edge of the Forbidden Sector. The readings were already starting to show increased radiation levels, and they were still hours away from their destination. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with focused efficiency. Amy Chen sat at the navigation console, her fingers dancing across the controls as she plotted their course. The data streaming across her screens would have terrified most galactic navigators. The Forbidden Sector was a maze of gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and spatial distortions that could tear a ship apart. But Amy had grown up sailing with her grandfather in the Pacific Ocean during storm season. She had learned to read weather patterns, to find safe paths through dangerous waters. This was the same skill, just on a larger scale. "Captain, I have mapped a course through the worst of the anomalies," she said, her voice calm. "It will not be smooth, but we can make it." Morrison nodded. "What kind of G-forces are we looking at?" "Peak loads around 4 Gs, maybe 5 in the worst sections. Duration will be about 20 minutes total across the entire journey. In the galactic community, most species considered anything above 1.5 Gs to be dangerous. Prolonged exposure to 2 Gs could be fatal for many aliens. 4 or 5 Gs was simply unthinkable, but Amy reported these numbers as casually as someone discussing the weather. "Understood," Morrison said. "All crew secure for high G maneuvers. This is going to be rough." In the engine room, Pete Hughes was making final adjustments to the shield systems. The Pteranodon was equipped with standard galactic shields, but Pete had spent the last 3 years modifying them. He had added layers of magnetic field generators, borrowing technology from Earth's old particle accelerators. He had reinforced the hull with materials designed to withstand atmospheric re-entry. The ship was no longer just a standard rescue vessel. It was a machine built to survive conditions that would destroy most other ships. "How are we looking down there, Pete?" Morrison's voice came through the intercom. Pete wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned. "Shields are holding steady, Captain. I have rerouted power from non-essential systems to give us an extra 20% capacity. We should be able to handle whatever this sector throws at us." "Should be able to?" Morrison asked. "Well, this is all theoretical until we actually fly through it," Pete admitted. "But I am confident. We built this ship tough. Good old-fashioned Earth engineering." The ship crossed into the Forbidden Sector, and immediately the crew felt the change. The radiation levels jumped sharply, and the ship's computer began sounding warnings. Red lights flashed on multiple consoles, indicating that the crew was being exposed to dangerous levels of cosmic radiation. But the crew barely reacted. They had been training for this, and their bodies were more resistant than the computer understood. Dr. Kyle Roberts monitored the crew's vital signs from the medical bay. He watched as radiation counters climbed higher and higher, reaching levels that would hospitalize most aliens within minutes. But the human crew showed only minor symptoms. Some nausea, some fatigue, but nothing critical. Kyle made notes in his medical log, documenting how human physiology handled these extreme conditions. "All crew, this is the doctor," he announced over the intercom. "Radiation exposure is within acceptable limits. If anyone starts feeling dizzy or nauseous, let me know immediately. Otherwise, we are good to continue." On the bridge, Nicole Sanders gripped the pilot controls as the ship began to shake. They were entering the first of the gravitational anomalies, and space itself seemed to twist around them. The ship's structural integrity alarms began to sound, warning that the hull was under stress. But Nicole had flown fighter jets through hurricanes during her time in the military. She knew how to handle turbulence. "Adjusting course by 2 degrees, she said, her voice steady. "Pete, I am going to need more power to the forward thrusters." "You got it," Pete's voice came back immediately. The ship responded, pushing through the distortion like a swimmer fighting a strong current. The Galactic Council watched the Pteranodon's progress through their monitoring systems. The chamber was silent as they observed the human ship penetrate deeper into the Forbidden Sector. Every species present had lost ships to this region over the centuries. They had tried multiple times to establish safe routes through it, but every attempt had ended in failure. Now they watched as the humans flew through conditions that should have destroyed their vessel in the first hour. "This is impossible," Ambassador Throck whispered. "Their shields should have collapsed by now." Ambassador Helen Price stood beside him, her arms crossed. "I told you, we come from a harsh world. We are built differently than you expect." "But the radiation," another council member protested. "Our sensors show levels that would kill my entire crew in minutes." "How are the humans surviving?" Helen smiled slightly. "On Earth, we evolved under a star that produces intense radiation. Our ancestors developed cellular repair mechanisms to handle constant DNA damage. Every human is born with natural resistance to radiation that you would consider lethal. We do not think of it as extreme. We think of it as normal. The council members exchanged looks of disbelief. They had studied Earth, had reviewed the data about its conditions, but they had not truly comprehended what it meant. Now they were beginning to understand. The humans were not just brave or reckless. They were genuinely adapted to survive conditions that would kill almost any other known species. On the Terran Dawn, the crew worked in shifts to manage the fatigue that came with the journey. The G-forces during the worst sections were exhausting, and even humans had their limits. Captain Morrison ordered rest periods for half the crew, while the others maintained the ship. In the recreation room, off-duty crew members gathered to eat and talk. Danny Cruz and Stephanie Ward sat together, reviewing the plans for the actual rescue operation. They were the specialists who would perform any external repairs or attach the tow cables to the Valori ship. Both had been Navy divers before joining the space program, comfortable with working in hostile environments while wearing protective suits. The radiation outside the ship is going to be intense, Stephanie said, studying the data on her tablet, way beyond anything we trained for. Danny shrugged. We will be in suits. They are rated for this kind of exposure, and it is not like we are going to be out there for hours. 20 minutes, maybe 30 tops. We have handled worse, have we? Stephanie raised an eyebrow. When did we handle worse than this? Danny grinned. Okay, maybe not worse, but we have handled bad. Remember that training exercise in the Arctic? 3 hours in the water at near freezing temperatures while fixing that submarine mock-up? Or that time in Nevada when we practiced repairs in 120-degree heat while wearing full gear? This is just another extreme environment. We adapt. That is what humans do. In the medical bay, Kyle Roberts prepared for what would come next. He had studied Valori physiology, learning what he could about their biology. They were a delicate species, evolved on a world with gentle conditions. Low gravity, stable climate, minimal radiation. The forbidden sector would be especially dangerous for them. Kyle set up an emergency treatment area, gathering supplies he might need. He hoped the Valori crew would be healthy enough to evacuate, but he prepared for the worst. Greg Palmer, the nurse, helped him organize the medical supplies. Do you think they will be okay? He asked quietly. Kyle looked at him. Honestly, I do not know. They have been exposed to conditions their bodies were never meant to handle, but we will do everything we can to help them. The ship shook violently as they passed through another gravitational anomaly. Amy Chen wrestled with the controls, adjusting their course in real time to find the safest path through the distortion. Sweat dripped down her face, but her hands remained steady. She had plotted this course carefully, identifying areas where the gravitational stress would be lowest. But theory and practice were different things. The actual conditions were worse than the data had predicted. Coming up on a strong current, she warned. This is going to be heavy. The crew braced themselves. The G-forces increased rapidly, pushing them back into their seats with tremendous force. 4 Gs, then 5. The ship groaned under the stress, metal creaking as it strained against forces that would have torn apart a standard galactic vessel. But the Terran Dawn held together, its reinforced structure doing exactly what Pete Hughes had designed it to do. Nicole Sanders fought the controls, keeping the ship on course even as her body felt like it weighed hundreds of pounds. Her vision began to tunnel, blood draining from her head due to the extreme forces. But she had experienced this before during high G training. She knew how to breathe, how to tense her muscles, how to keep blood flowing to her brain. The blackout never came. After 20 seconds that felt like hours, the forces began to ease. The ship emerged from the gravitational current, and the crew let out collective sighs of relief. They were through the worst of it. The rest of the journey would still be dangerous, but nothing they could not handle. Good flying, Nicole, Morrison said quietly. The airlock doors of the Terran Dawn opened with a hiss, and Danny Cruz stepped out into the void. Behind him, Stephanie Ward followed, both of them wearing heavy spacesuits designed for the most extreme environments. The suits were bulky and tough, built to protect against radiation, temperature extremes, and physical damage. They looked more like ancient diving suits than the sleek gear most galactic species used for spacewalks. Radio check, Danny said into his helmet communicator. Reading you loud and clear, Pete Hughes replied from inside the ship. Radiation levels are climbing. You have 30 minutes maximum out there before exposure becomes dangerous, even with the suits. Copy that, Stephanie said. We will work fast. The two specialists pushed off from the Terran Dawn, using their suit thrusters to cross the empty space between the two ships. The Luminous Hope floated nearby, dark and silent except for the emergency lights that still flickered along its hull. Behind both vessels, a wall of violent energy churned in the distance. The radiation storm was building, a massive wave of deadly particles that would sweep through this region of space in less than 4 hours. On the bridge of the Luminous Hope, Commander Zixala watched through the viewport as the two humans approached. She had seen spacewalks before, but never in conditions like these. The radiation levels outside would kill a Valori in seconds. Even in the best protective suits her people could make, no one would survive more than a few minutes. Yet these humans moved with calm confidence, as if they were simply taking a walk in a park. They are insane, Pip-Talk whispered beside her. They will die out there. But Zixala was not so sure. She had been watching these humans since they arrived. Everything about them defied what she thought she knew about life in the galaxy. They came from a world that should have been impossible to survive, yet they thrived there. They flew through conditions that killed other species, yet they seemed barely affected. Perhaps they could survive this too. Danny and Stephanie reached the Luminous Hope and began attaching the tow cables. The work was difficult, requiring strength and precision. Each cable had to be secured to specific points on the alien ship's hull, places where the structure was strong enough to handle the stress of being towed. The humans worked methodically, their movements practiced from years of training. First cable secured, Danny reported, moving to attachment point 2. Inside the Terran Dawn, Pete Hughes monitored their progress while making final adjustments to the ship's systems. Towing another vessel through the forbidden sector was going to push the Terran Dawn to its limits. He had already diverted all non-essential power to the engines and shields. Life support was running at minimum levels. The ship's computer kept flashing warnings about overload risks, but Pete ignored them. He knew his machine. It would hold together. How much time do we have before that storm hits? Captain Morrison asked from the bridge. Amy Chen checked her displays. 3 hours and 40 minutes. But we need to account for acceleration time. We should start moving in the next 20 minutes to have any safety margin. Morrison nodded. Pete, can your team have those cables attached in 20 minutes? They will, Pete replied with confidence. Danny and Stephanie are the best. They will get it done. Outside, the two specialists worked as quickly as safety allowed. The radiation was intense even through their suits. Both of them could feel the effects. Nausea, fatigue, a strange tingling sensation in their hands and feet. But they had trained for this. They knew the symptoms, knew their limits, and knew they had enough time to finish the job before those limits were reached. Third cable secured, Stephanie reported. 1 more to go. I am on it, Danny said, moving to the final attachment point. His fingers felt clumsy in the thick gloves, but he forced them to move precisely. The cable clicked into place and he activated the locking mechanism. 4th cable secured. All attachments confirmed. We are good to go. Outstanding work, both of you, Pete said. Get back inside. Medical is standing by. The two specialists returned to the Terran Dawn and cycled through the decontamination process. When they finally removed their suits, both were pale and sweating. Greg Palmer was waiting with water and medication to help their bodies process the radiation exposure. Kyle Roberts ran quick scans to assess the damage. You both took a serious dose out there, Kyle said, studying the readings. Nothing immediately dangerous, but you are going to feel terrible for the next few days. Nausea, headaches, fatigue. Your bodies will repair the cellular damage, but it is going to take time. Worth it, Danny said, managing a weak smile. We got the job done. On the Luminous Hope, preparations for evacuation were nearly complete. The Valori crew had gathered their most important data and personal belongings. They stood in the main corridor, ready to transfer to the human ship. But Zixala felt worry growing in her chest. She had received information about the Terran Dawn's internal environment, and the numbers horrified her. Commander, are you certain about this? One of her crew members asked nervously. The temperature on their ship is 30 degrees higher than our comfort range. The oxygen levels are toxic. The gravity is twice what we are used to. We may not survive on their ship. Zixala had the same concerns. But what choice did they have? The humans are setting up a special area for us in their cargo bay. They will adjust the life support to match our needs. We must trust them. The first group of Valori evacuated through a flexible tunnel that connected the two ships. As they crossed into the Terran dawn, they were immediately struck by the harsh conditions. The air was thick and heavy with oxygen. The temperature made them feel like they were inside an oven. The gravity pulled at their bodies with brutal force, making every step an effort. Human crew members were waiting to help them. Nicole Sanders and Chris Bennett guided the Valori to the prepared section of the cargo bay. It was a large space that had been sealed off and equipped with life support systems adjusted for Valori biology. The temperature was cooler here, the oxygen levels lower, the gravity partially compensated by special flooring. "Welcome aboard," Nicole said gently, helping an elderly Valori scientist who struggled with the walk. "You are safe now. We are going to get you home." The evacuations continued in waves, with human crew members patiently helping each group of Valori. Some of the aliens were injured, suffering from radiation exposure during their time stranded in the Forbidden Sector. Kyle Roberts and Greg Palmer treated them as they arrived, working quickly to stabilize the worst cases. Kyle found himself fascinated by Valori physiology as he worked. Their bodies were so different from humans. They had 3 hearts instead of 1, distributed throughout their torso to maintain circulation in their low-gravity environment. Their skin was thin and sensitive, designed to absorb nutrients from their planet's mineral-rich air. Everything about them spoke of evolution in a gentle, stable world. One young Valori female was barely conscious when she arrived. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin had taken on a gray pallor. Kyle immediately recognized the signs of severe radiation sickness. He placed her on a medical bed and began treatment, using a combination of galactic medical technology and Earth-based techniques. "Stay with me," he said softly, even though he was not sure if she could understand his language. "You are going to be okay. We have got you." Greg Palmer assisted, monitoring her vital signs while Kyle administered medications. The young Valori's 3 hearts were beating irregularly, struggling to maintain circulation, but slowly, with careful treatment, she began to stabilize. Her breathing deepened and color returned to her skin. Commander Zixala was the last to evacuate. She took one final look at the Luminous Hope, her ship, before stepping through the tunnel. It hurt to leave it behind, even knowing they had no choice. This vessel had been her home for 3 years. Her crew had made so many discoveries here. Now it was just a dead shell about to be dragged through hell. She entered the Terran dawn and immediately felt the oppressive conditions. The gravity made her legs tremble with effort. The heat was overwhelming. But human hands reached out to steady her, and a kind voice spoke in her language. "Commander Zixala, I am Dr. Kyle Roberts. Let me help you to the rest area." Kyle guided her through the ship to the cargo bay where the rest of her crew had gathered. Zixala looked around at her people. They were frightened and exhausted, but alive. The humans moved among them, offering water, food, and medical attention. Despite their fearsome reputation as Deathworlders, these humans were gentle and caring. "All crew accounted for," Pip-Talk reported. "Everyone is safe." Zixala felt tears forming in her eyes, a reaction her species shared with humans. "Thank you," she said to Kyle. "Thank you for saving us." Kyle smiled. "That is what we do. Now rest. We have a long journey ahead." On the bridge, Captain Morrison received confirmation that all Valori were aboard and secure. "Amy, how are we looking on time?" "Storm will hit in 2 hours and 50 minutes, Amy replied. "We need to go now. Pete, are we ready for towing operations?" "As ready as we will ever be," Pete said from engineering. "The cables are solid, and I have reinforced the structural points. But Captain, I am not going to lie. This is going to push the ship hard. We are talking about..." The first rays of clear space felt like a blessing. After 20 hours of fighting through the Forbidden Sector, the Terran Dawn and the Luminous Hope finally emerged into safer territory. The radiation levels dropped sharply. The gravitational anomalies faded away and the deadly storm that had chased them dissipated into the black void behind them. They had made it. On the bridge, Captain Morrison allowed himself a moment to close his eyes and breathe. His body ached from the long hours of tension and the repeated exposure to high G-forces. Around him, his crew sagged in their seats, exhausted but victorious. They had done what the galaxy said was impossible. They had rescued the Valori and brought them home. "All systems stable," Pete Hughes reported from engineering. His voice was hoarse from fatigue. "We have some damage to the secondary power systems and stress fractures in the port hull plates, but Nothing critical. The girl held together. She always does, Morrison said with a tired smile. Good work, Pete. Tell your team to get some rest. We have a long coast ahead of us before we reach a station. In the cargo bay, the Valori crew was slowly recovering from the ordeal. The brutal acceleration had stopped and they could finally move without feeling like they were being crushed. Dr. Kyle Roberts and Nurse Greg Palmer moved among them, checking vitals and treating injuries. Most of the Valori were suffering from exhaustion and minor injuries, but the young female who had been severely ill was stable now and resting comfortably. Commander Zixala sat against a bulkhead, trying to gather her strength. Every part of her body hurt. Her muscles trembled from the strain they had endured, but they were alive. Her entire crew had survived, thanks to these remarkable humans. She watched as Kyle moved through the bay, his gentle hands treating her people with care and skill. How strange it was that these beings from a death world could be so kind. Commander? Kyle approached her with a medical scanner. May I check your condition? Zixala nodded weakly. Kyle ran the scanner over her body, studying the readings with a thoughtful expression. You have some internal bruising from the acceleration forces, and your cardiovascular system is stressed. But you are going to be fine. You need rest and proper nutrition. We have prepared food that should be compatible with your biology. Thank you, Dr. Roberts, Zixala said. You and your crew have saved our lives. I do not know how we can ever repay you. Kyle smiled. You do not need to repay us. We are just glad we could help. Over the next few hours, as the ships coasted through space toward the nearest safe station, the Valori crew began to interact more with their human rescuers. The initial fear and awe gave way to curiosity. These humans were strange and powerful, but they were also friendly and approachable. Stories began to circulate among the Valori about the journey through the Forbidden Sector and the incredible abilities these Deathworlders possessed. Pip Talk, the young communications officer, found himself talking with Lisa Grant, who had been the one to first receive their distress call. Lisa had come aboard the Terran Dawn for the return journey, wanting to meet the people she had helped save. I still cannot believe you survived the conditions in that sector, Pip Talk said. The radiation alone should have killed you all. Lisa shrugged. We are used to radiation. Earth's sun is pretty intense, and our planet does not have the magnetic field strength that most worlds have. We evolved to handle it. Growing up, my family used to go camping in the mountains. The radiation exposure at high altitude is much higher than at sea level. We just think of it as normal. Normal? Pip Talk's eyes widened. But our instruments showed levels that would require emergency evacuation on any Valori world. Different worlds, different normal, Lisa said with a smile. What about your homeworld? What is it like? Pip Talk described Valor, painting a picture of a gentle planet with stable weather, low gravity, and skies that rarely saw storms. It sounded peaceful and beautiful, but also fragile. Lisa tried to imagine growing up in such a place and found it difficult. Earth was violent and chaotic by comparison, but that chaos had made humanity strong. In another part of the cargo bay, Nicole Sanders was talking with a group of Valori scientists who were fascinated by human piloting techniques. They had watched in amazement as she navigated through the gravitational anomalies, performing maneuvers that seemed impossible. How did you learn to fly like that? One scientist asked. The reflexes and calculations required must be extraordinary. Nicole laughed. Practice, mostly. I started flying planes when I was 16. Then I joined the military and flew fighter jets. You learn to make quick decisions and trust your instincts. Space navigation is just an extension of that. But the G-forces, another scientist protested. You flew through sections where the forces exceeded 5 Gs. How can your body survive that? Training and adaptation, Nicole explained. Humans can withstand high G-forces better than most species because of Earth's gravity. Growing up in 2.3 Gs means our bones are denser, our muscles stronger, and our cardiovascular systems more robust. We do special exercises to improve our tolerance even further. Fighter pilots regularly experience 6 or 7 Gs during combat maneuvers. It is not comfortable, but we can handle it. The Valori scientists looked at each other in wonder. They were beginning to understand that humans were not just lucky survivors. They were the product of millions of years of evolution on a world that had constantly challenged them to become stronger, faster, and more resilient. Earth had not been kind to its children, but it had made them mighty. Commander Zixala made her way slowly through the cargo bay, still moving carefully due to her injuries. She found Captain Morrison standing near one of the viewports looking out at the stars. She approached him quietly, not wanting to disturb his thoughts. "Captain Morrison," she said softly. "May I speak with you?" Morrison turned and smiled. "Of course, Commander. How are you feeling?" "Sore but alive, thanks to you and your crew. I wanted to ask you something. Why did you come for us? Your people barely know us. We are strangers from a different world, yet you risked everything to save us." Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Back on Earth, we have a lot of different cultures and beliefs. But there is one thing that most humans agree on. When someone calls for help, you answer. It does not matter if they are friend or stranger, if they look like you or speak your language. If someone needs help and you can give it, you do. That is what makes us human. Zixala felt tears forming in her eyes again. "I have spent my life studying the galaxy, learning about different species and civilizations, but I have never encountered anything quite like your people. You come from a world that should have destroyed you, yet it made you strong. You face conditions that kill others, yet you survive. And despite your power, you use it to help those who are weaker. Your species is remarkable. We are just people doing what we think is right," Morrison said modestly. "But thank you. It means a lot to hear that." The journey continued and more stories were exchanged. The Valori learned about Earth, about the oceans that covered most of its surface and could crush submarines with pressure that rivaled the core of some planets. They learned about the tectonic plates that constantly shifted and collided, creating earthquakes and volcanoes. They learned about the weather systems that spawned hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards. They learned about the predators that had hunted humans throughout their evolution, forcing them to become clever and cooperative to survive. And the humans learned about Valor and the other worlds of the galaxy. They learned about civilizations that had never known war because their worlds were so abundant that conflict was unnecessary. They learned about species that lived for hundreds of years in peace and comfort. They learned about a galaxy that had developed technology and culture without the constant pressure of survival that had driven humanity. It was a revelation for both sides. The Valori realized that their view of the galaxy had been limited. They had assumed that all life evolved under gentle conditions like their own. The existence of Earth and its people challenged everything they thought they knew about what was possible. And the humans realized that their world truly was exceptional. Most of the galaxy lived in comfort and safety that humans could barely imagine. Danny Cruz and Stephanie Ward were recovering in the medical bay, resting after their exposure to extreme radiation during the cable attachment. Several Valori scientists came to visit them, curious about how humans could survive such exposure. "Our doctor says you absorbed enough radiation to kill a Valori 50 times over," one scientist said. "Yet you are recovering. How is this possible?" Danny, looking pale but cheerful, explained. "Human cells have really good repair mechanisms. When radiation damages our DNA, our bodies can fix it. We evolved this ability because Earth has a lot of natural radiation. Every human gets exposed to radiation from the sun, from the ground, from the air we breathe. Our bodies learn to deal with it. But does it not hurt you?" the scientist asked. "Oh, it hurts," Stephanie said with a weak laugh. "We feel terrible right now. Nausea, headaches, fatigue. But we will heal. In a few days we will be fine. Our bodies will repair the damage and we will be back to normal." The Galactic Council's emergency response fleet looked impressive as it hung in space near the outer rim of the Forbidden Sector. 12 massive ships from various species represented the combined rescue capability of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They had assembled here hours ago, prepared to attempt a rescue mission that everyone knew was hopeless. But they had waited, unwilling to enter the deadly sector, debating their options while time ran out. Now they watched in stunned silence as the Terran Dawn emerged from the sector, towing the Luminous Hope behind it. The small human vessel looked battered, its hull showing scorch marks and stress damage, but it was intact, and both ships were moving steadily toward the fleet. In the command center of the Thorian flagship, Ambassador Throck stared at his display screens in disbelief. They actually did it. The humans rescued them. Not just rescued them, his tactical officer said quietly. They saved the ship too. They towed it out through conditions that should have torn both vessels apart. Throck felt something he had not experienced in decades. Humility. His people, the Thorians, were proud. They had been one of the founding species of the Galactic Council, They considered themselves strong and capable, but they had not dared to attempt this rescue. They had told themselves it was impossible, that the risk was too great. And then these newcomers, these humans who had only been in space for a handful of years, had done what the Thorians would not. The news spread through the galaxy faster than light, carried by instant communication networks that connected thousands of worlds. Within hours, everyone knew the story. The Valori crew trapped in the Forbidden Sector, the Galactic Council's inability to help, and the humans who had answered the call, crossed impossible distances through impossible conditions and brought everyone home alive. On Earth, the story became an instant sensation. People gathered in public spaces to watch the news broadcasts showing the Terran Dawn's triumphant emergence from the Forbidden Sector. Pride swelled in human hearts across the planet. Their people had proven themselves on the galactic stage, not through conquest or domination, but through courage and compassion. The Terran Dawn docked at Centralis Station, the massive orbital facility that served as the headquarters for the Galactic Council. Medical teams rushed aboard to treat the Valori crew, though they found that Dr. Kyle Roberts and his team had already provided excellent care. The Valori were weak and exhausted, but they would all make full recoveries. Commander Zixola was the last to leave the human ship. She stood at the airlock, facing Captain Morrison and his crew. "I do not have words adequate to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved 40 lives today. You gave us back our future. My people will never forget what you have done." Morrison shook her delicate hand gently, careful not to hurt her with his stronger grip. "We were honored to help, Commander. If you ever need us again, just call." Zixola smiled through her tears. "I hope we never need such a dramatic rescue again, but I hope we will meet as friends." "Count on it," Morrison said warmly. The Valori delegation was escorted to the medical facilities, while the crew of the Terran Dawn was summoned to the Galactic Council chambers. They walked through the grand hallways of Centralis Station, drawing stares from every alien they passed. Word of their achievement had spread, and everyone wanted to see the humans who had done the impossible. The council chamber was enormous, a circular room with seating for representatives from over 100 species. At the center was a raised platform where those addressing the council would stand. The human crew stood there now, looking small and humble despite their great accomplishment. Captain Morrison wore his dress uniform, as did the rest of his crew. They stood at attention, waiting to hear what the council would say. Ambassador Helen Price stood with them, pride evident on her face. She had argued for Earth's inclusion in this community, had defended humanity's capabilities when others doubted. Now her people had proven her right in the most dramatic way possible. The council chamber fell silent as the prime speaker, an ancient being from a species called the Delenti, rose to address the assembly. His form was vaguely humanoid, but his skin shimmered with colors that did not exist in normal light. He had led the council for 50 years, guiding the galaxy through challenges and changes. "Captain Jake Morrison of Earth," the prime speaker said, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Your crew has accomplished something remarkable. You accepted a mission that we deemed impossible. You flew through conditions that have destroyed countless ships over the centuries. You saved 40 lives and recovered a vessel filled with invaluable research. The Galactic Council wishes to honor your achievement with the Star of Valor, our highest recognition for courage and selfless service." An attendant brought forward a crystalline medallion that glowed with inner light. The prime speaker placed it around Morrison's neck and the chamber erupted in applause. Representatives from dozens of species stood, honoring the human crew with gestures of respect from their various cultures. Morrison waited for the applause to quiet, then spoke. "With respect, Prime Speaker, I accept this honor on behalf of my crew. But I want to be clear about something. We did not do anything special. We simply responded to a distress call. Where I come from, that is what you are supposed to do. Someone needs help, you help them. It is as simple as that." The Prime Speaker studied Morrison with his ancient eyes. "You say it is simple, but if it were truly simple, why did no one else attempt this rescue? Why did the galaxy's most advanced civilization stand by and do nothing?" Morrison considered his words carefully. "I think it is because most species in this galaxy have not had to struggle the way humans have. You evolved on gentle worlds where survival was easy. You built your civilizations without the constant pressure of a harsh environment, pushing you to become stronger. That is not a weakness. It just means you developed differently than we did. Earth is not a kind world. It has storms that can level cities, earthquakes that can tear continents apart, and predators that evolved alongside us. Humans learned early that if we did not adapt, if we did not become tough and resilient, we would die. So we became tough. We became resilient. And we learned to help each other because that was the only way to survive. Ambassador Throck stood from his seat. Captain Morrison, your words humble me. I argued against attempting this rescue. I believed it could not be done. I was wrong. The Thorian Empire wishes to formally request an alliance with Earth. We have much to learn from your people. One by one, other ambassadors stood and made similar requests. The Keswick Collective, the Archon Federation, the Valori Assembly, and dozens more. They all wanted to establish closer ties with humanity. They wanted to learn from these Deathworlders who had shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. Ambassador Helen Price stood and addressed the council. Earth accepts these offers of friendship with gratitude. But I want to make something clear. Humans do not want to dominate this community. We do not seek to prove our superiority. We simply want to be part of something larger than ourselves and contribute what we can. If that means responding to emergencies in extreme conditions, then we will do so gladly. But we also want to learn from you. Every species here has knowledge and wisdom that we lack. Together we can build something better than any of us could achieve alone. Her words struck a chord with many in the chamber. This was not the speech of conquerors or those seeking power. This was the voice of people who genuinely wanted to be partners in the galactic community. In the weeks that followed, the rescue became known throughout the galaxy as the Deathworlder Protocol. It changed how species viewed humanity, and more importantly, how they thought about survival and strength. The assumptions that had guided galactic civilization for thousands of years were suddenly open to question. Perhaps harsh worlds did not produce inferior species. Perhaps the struggle to survive made life stronger, not weaker. The Galactic Council established a new organization, the Terran Rescue Service. It would be staffed by human volunteers who would respond to emergencies in extreme environments. The funding came from dozens of species who recognized the value of having such a capability. Within weeks, 3 new rescue ships were commissioned, based on the design of the Terran Dawn, but with improvements suggested by Pete Hughes and his engineering team. Captain Morrison was offered command of the entire service, but he declined. I am a ship captain, not an administrator, he said. Give me a crew and a vessel, and I will go wherever I am needed. But someone else can handle the paperwork. The position went to Admiral Richard Hayes, who retired from Earth's military, to take on this new challenge. He assembled a team of experienced personnel and began the process of building an organization that would serve the entire galaxy. Commander Zixula returned to Valor with her crew, and they were welcomed as heroes. But Zixala carried with her a changed perspective. She had seen the galaxy from a new angle, had experienced what it meant to truly struggle for survival, and had learned that strength came in many forms. She began advocating for educational exchanges with Earth, arguing that Valori children should learn about different types of worlds and different approaches to life.